Okay, so hello and welcome back to the Start a Glamping Business podcast. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, and I apologise for that, but I promise you that we'll make up for it with today's guest. Today we have got Todd Wynne-Parry, who is an outdoor hospitality advisor, and anyone who's been in the glamping industry for a little while will know that he's a highly respected figure within it, who has got a wealth of experience in the outdoor hospitality industry. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Todd. You've got a stellar career. You've had a stellar career with Marriott, Starwood, InterContinental, AutoCamp, and we are going to dig into that a little bit. But first, I'd just like you to introduce yourself, what you do, and how you help clients.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thanks very much for having me here, Nick. Really appreciate it. It's great. It's a great little podcast, and I enjoy watching it. So my work right now is really almost exclusively dedicated to the outdoor hospitality sector. I do some other bits and pieces as well, but the client base that I have really breaks down into three specific groups. There's site owners, and those can be small mom and pops, people just investing in a little bit of land, up to larger institutions that have many sites already, or sites that are 100, 700, 800 acres, 1,000 acres, more. And then the brands. So I work closely with a handful of the brands on their either strategically helping them to grow and find different ways to grow and expand their footprint, and then investors that are either looking to get into the sector on a project by project basis, or literally investing in one of those bigger branded management platforms. And it tends to scan the globe. Horwath HTL has 52 offices around the world, and pretty much all the offices in every corner of the world are getting inquiries around how to add glamping or outdoor hospitality to existing hotels or to sites that people own. So it's really kind of a global thing, and I try and help where I can in those other offices. But the majority of my work ends up being here in the U.S. because I'm based here in the U.S. So. That's kind of the work in a nutshell right now. The background, I think you wanted me to go over some of my background, so I'll do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, you've sort of migrated naturally into the outdoor hospitality space now, but and most of the time we kind of skip over the background of a lot of our guests just because it's not really that relevant to what they're doing today. But I think, I mentioned some of the names that you've worked with over the years, and clearly that there's going to be a lot of lessons learned from those experiences. So I'd love to tell you a little bit more. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about some of the work you've done in the past, some of the brand names you worked with in the past, and maybe what you've learned from that, and then how that moved on towards the outdoor hospitality business as well.
Sure. So I'll start with the fact that I grew up in Michigan, sort of hunting and fishing and camping and Boy Scouting and hiking and doing all those things. And so that has been a constant trend or a constant theme throughout my career, whether it was here in the U.S. or in Hong Kong or Singapore, trekking in the Himalayas, or saltwater fly fishing in Australia. So I've always been, the outdoors has always been sort of my passion, if you will, or the thing that centers me when work gets crazy. But my career started out really doing hotel business analysis, market studies, feasibility studies, and I did that for, ironically, Laventhal and Horwath, which was the predecessor of Horwath HDL in San Diego, working up in California and Mexico, really studying the business of hotels and then the feasibility of new hotel projects, and then ended up doing that over in Hong Kong for a long time. And then my career kind of switched from doing the analysis part and consulting in that world to really working with hotel companies, as you mentioned, and trying to grow their brands. So whether it was a company that was already well penetrated into a market, expanding that penetration through its brand extensions, or taking a brand that never been in a particular market before and penetrating that market with that brand, and then expanding its footprint. So, and that was really kind of my thing that's got me up in the morning. I really enjoyed growing companies. I thought that was exciting, and eventually I did the W in Sydney prior to the Olympics, and we had no W's open. We had no collateral. We had nothing, and it was like the easiest deal I ever did because people were just so excited about a brand like W that was going to come out and do things differently than everybody else, which was great. And so I got really enamored with the sort of independent lifestyle boutique sector, and really tried to stay in that genre for about another decade or two after that. And then I was working with Two Roads Hospitality, and all of those brands that we had, which were Thompson Hotels and Joie de Vivre and Alila and Tommy and Destination Hotels, they all got sold to Hyatt, and there was like no more independent companies anymore. All the big companies had swallowed up all what I thought the cool brands were. So I was a little bit disappointed, I suppose, that there wasn't anybody really out there at the bleeding edge of hotel design and new ideas. And at the time, I was providing some pro bono consulting to AutoCamp, giving them some pointers on how to grow and how to do things differently and hopefully accelerate their trajectory. And anyway, they end up asking me to come on board and help them and do that. And so I did that, which was really great. And I spent the first couple of weeks or so when I was there really just studying the outdoor hospitality sector and studying, where the white space was for these guys, where could they grow with what they had already established, not using their investors' money, because that was sort of quarantined for specific sites and only the AutoCamp brand. So my work there was really to figure out how to grow in other ways and shapes and forms and markets and things like that. And then the pandemic came, and sort of everything got reshuffled, and I went into consulting. They became my first client, and I still work with them very closely. I talked to the CEO quite a bit, and still looking to help them grow. But I brought on other brands as well and started working with site owners that I'd known and that were out there. And the more I studied the sector, the more I just got excited about it, because there were so many new entrants to the sector, and the hotel industry is very slow to change, right? It takes forever to change. Part of the reason for that is that the hotel companies don't actually own the actual bricks and mortar typically, right? They might own the brand. They may, in not all places, own the management as well, but really it's just the branding. And so other money has the bricks and mortar. Other money has the lion's share of the product. And so to get that to change, the brand or the management company or the owner, they all have to be in sync on how that change is going to come. And it takes a long time. And in fact, as about 10 or 20 years ago, when sort of the independent boutique lifestyle branding was sort of coming out, people said this is really exciting, because the biggest innovation in hotels in the last 3 decades has been people folding the toilet paper at the end of the roll. That was like a big innovation in hotels for a long time, and other industries just grow faster because they have more control over the levers. Like the airline industry has always been out in front of the hotel part of tourism in self check-in kiosks and how they deal with their revenue management. They've always been decades ahead of hotels, and so I was excited in this sector to see new entrants to the market doing things that other people haven't done, because they didn't know whether it would work or whether or not. They didn't care, frankly, and so that's been really exciting to me, to see new, fresh talent coming into the market from people who've never been in hospitality before, and just going, we think this could work really cool, and then they try it, and sometimes it works and it's amazing, and sometimes it doesn't, but they figure it out. And so that's kind of why I was so excited about the sector, getting that inspiration from a design and operational perspective, really. And when you look at the demand and the supply for the sector, you find that the demand is outrageously high, and the supply is just plugging along, taking a long time to get there. And I think really that stems from, there's human nature, right? And human nature always has this sort of want and desire to get to balance. And as technology and these silly things take over so much of our lives, you find that the human nature is you need to balance that high tech with high touch. So whether that's getting out and walking, or touching a leaf or a tree, or smelling the green grass, or whatever it might be, you just find that human nature is that you need to always have this balance, and you'll work towards this balance for space, getting out of the city and into the burbs or into the woods and all that. So I don't think there's any end to the demand from the human nature perspective. And the other issue is behavior, right? I remember when we were kids in the 70s, you drive down the road, you'd finish a bag of Doritos and a bottle of soda, and you just throw it out the window and keep driving, right? Pretty soon people are saying, hey, stop polluting, right? And so we were able to change our behavior around how we deal with things. And so I think that with glamping, you have the opportunity to make the outdoors much more approachable for people who are afraid to put up tents and don't want to sleep on the floor and all that good stuff. And so it really is becoming a behavioral change that, hey, I can go into the outdoors because there's these new options that aren't quite so rough as a tent or towing a trailer or something like that. So I'm pretty bullish.
Yeah. And what you said about I mean, I call them mom and pop operators, people who maybe have, it's quite common for me to speak to someone who's been in digital marketing all their life or the real estate industry or whatever. And they're just looking for a change of lifestyle, a more enjoyable business. And they, think, okay, we've got a property or we know of a property. Let's put a few tents up and see how it goes. And I think, it's definitely a more accessible industry. I know not anyone can start a glamping business, but it's a lot more approachable than, say, I wouldn't know where to start if I decided to open a hotel tomorrow. Like, what do you do there? Where's the money coming from? It's a lot cheaper and easier to start a glamping business, although obviously it's not without its hurdles. So in terms of the explosion of the glamping industry, obviously, the outdoor hospitality industry has been around for a long time with campgrounds and RV parks and things like that. But this newer frontier, I suppose, of glamping has really exploded in the last 5-10 years. You've mentioned sort of three drivers there, I suppose, of the adaptability of the industry compared to hotels, the ability for people to escape from technology and busy city life into the natural world, and the fact that glamping it makes nature more approachable than, say, traditional tent camping. Would you say those are the three key drivers to the growth of the industry, or do you think there's anything else that's playing into it as well?
Well, yeah, and I think the big issue is the technology there. I mean, part of the problem with the hotel industry in terms of how it grew and how it evolved was that, it was a bit hemmed in by technology. Making a reservation was sort of a telex sort of issue. It was sort of like World War II or something like that. Dealing with Morse code or whatever in the early days, and so really the expansion of technology and the ability to get on the internet and market your property has really, I think, been the big change, particularly when you meld that with the gig economy or the sharing economy. So yes, people who own a bit of land out there can throw some tents up, and then they can go online and they can market that and let the world know that they've got, a couple of tents that you can stay on and stuff like that. So I think that the technology has really been key, and having these people kind of figuring out, wait a minute, why can't I just put something on my lawn and or my backyard and let people stay there? It's fantastic, and it is great that it fills in some of that supply that's just taking so long to get there to meet the demand. I think also, the groups like yourselves who kind of help out the mom and pops, and I get that saying, but it always makes me think of some older couple in their 60s or 70s who sort of Greta and Ralph, who run an RV park in the summertime in the north in the US, and then they drive in their RV down to Florida for the wintertime, and the reality is that's sort of moving on, and now you get younger people who really do have the heart of an innkeeper, and they want to do this, and so they're doing it in different and new ways, which is really great, whether it's a small bit of land or actually taking over an old RV park or campground and kind of bringing into the century, allowing great Wi-Fi's for digital nomads, and really putting creature comforts in that are a little more in line with today's travelers, which is great. And the other thing too is that I think as more companies like both of ours come into the market and express some realities around the business, we're able to show new entrants to the business that, look, if you're going to put up a tent or two in your yard or whatever, and offer that out and have some passive income coming from that, just like doing an ADU or a extra room in the house on Airbnb or whatever, that's great, and that's fine. But once you start, moving up and you're getting into a lot more units, okay, now this is starting to become a lifestyle for you. And if you have the heart of an innkeeper and it's really, it is your why, you get up every morning, you're so excited to be the host for people having a great experience in wherever you may be, then great. But some people get there and they're like, oh my God, this is killing me. This is really a lot of work, and it's not how I saw myself spending my days dealing with this. So then they can kind of move on and maybe not do it anymore, scale it back a little bit, or be a little more forthright in their education to the client about what they're going to receive at the moment. But I think that's been great that people can dip in and dip out of that. I always say up to 20 units is a lifestyle, because it's going to be you and or you and your spouse or whatever doing this work. And then after 20 starts to be a business. And so that's kind of, after 20 units, you could maybe start getting a full-time manager, and somebody else is dealing with a lot of the headaches of innkeeping.
Yeah, and the company who have done that at scale and done it very well is AutoCamp. They're one of the biggest players in the industry. They've got a lot of money behind them, and they're just smashing out of the park. Now you obviously you mentioned earlier that you did a little bit of pro bono consulting for them, and then eventually joined them, I believe, as a chief growth officer. I'd be interested in knowing what exactly you did on a day-to-day basis with AutoCamp, and maybe how you played a role in their expansion.
Sure. So my original mandate was really to try and grow them through finding management contracts out there, and this was 2019, so pre-pandemic, and the market was really not entirely ready for that. There's not a lot of independent players that were at the time were really excited about putting $20-30 million into a project and handing the keys over to somebody else, and the debt side of the equation was a little bit awkward as well, because the Airstream unit or a tent is considered personal property, not real estate, real property. So lending on those things are a little bit more difficult. And anyway, so it was a little bit difficult, but I was able to obtain a couple sites for them in the Southwest, and move through the process with that. But really, like I mentioned, I was focused on finding other ways for them to grow, whether it was through straight management contract, not using their own money, or one of my suggestions was that a company called Lodge, Loge, and Basecamp out of Tahoe were really doing great work in taking an old motel or hotel and kind of stripping it back and putting the cosmetics of the outdoor sort of world on it, a lot of plaid and leather, and really focusing the business on people that were doing outdoor activities. So the whole setup was designed around, bring your mountain bike, or if you're going to go skiing or whatever you're going to do, and everything was designed, and the whole ethos of the property was in that outdoor sort of activity area. And so I felt that this was a space that would allow AutoCamp to grow very quickly, because there are so many motels around the country, and a lot in these great locations where people want to do outdoorsy things and engage with nature. And so one of my suggestions was look, let's do, like, literally just take that idea and run with it. And eventually they did. They have a brand now they've launched called Field Station, which is literally the same concept. And then about 6 months after they launched Field Station, Barry Sternlicht from Starwood and Ben Weprin from Collegiate Hotels, Graduate Hotels, they launched Field and Stream Hotels, which is again exactly the same thing. Take
Stolen
old stock.
half the name.
Yeah. Well, Field and Stream, I don't know if you knew that, but in the States, it's sort of a legendary magazine for hunting and fishing. And my dad had Field and Stream on the coffee table, my whole life, and sort of a stodgy old thing. But Barry Sternlicht, in his infinite wisdom, bought the IP to the Field and Stream name, and now it's this. And now they're going to roll out these sort of redone motels, and it's part of the reason that I felt that was important is because when you're staying in an auto camp, you're talking about $350 to $450 a night, average rate. And I said, look, that's nice, but that's probably not recession proof. It's going to have some difficulties in certain markets, and you need to have a lower price point product. So that genre of these motels being flipped, and again, there's Base Camp, which kind of came out with it. Lodge took it to another level. Their properties are really great. Field and Stream and Field Station, they're all kind of in that $150 to $200 average room rate, which is just much more approachable for people. And so I think that's really important. And then I also did work with them around taking the brand and maybe not having it to be so immersed in nature, because their original property was in Santa Barbara. It was 6 properties, six Airstreams. And when you peeled back there were some negative comments because there was a really nasty bar that was next door to it. So you'd get a lot of negative comments, like the bar was cranking till 4 a.m. The bartenders and cooks were, outside, smoking cigarettes and yelling till, early in the morning. This was horrible, type of thing.
Sign me up.
Yeah. Well, if you took those complaints away and then you just looked at what people really liked about it, the urban environment of having an Airstream like right in a downtown environment was really novel, and people loved it, and they paid dearly for it. So I was like, you got to take that energy and jujitsu that and look to other urban RV parks, and there's a ton around. They're odd, but they're around. Or other urban settings, and take the AutoCamp, this great sort of brand that you've already created, and people that are in the know really know it, and do a product that doesn't have the very expensive clubhouse, and isn't all about being surrounded by bugs and fire camps and birds twerting and stuff like that. It might be in an urban setting, but it's really cool accommodation, and people will pay for it. And so that was another thing. I came up with a plan to kind of do that. I had 4 or 5 projects up, but never really got those underway. Maybe one day soon they'll do it. But if you look at RV parks, and I know this is very U.S. centric, but if you look at U.S. parks, RV parks in the States, they'll have usually a mix of pull in, pull out RV, full hookup sites. But then they'll also have maybe a safari tent or a yurt or a cabin. And they can be, just a handful, or they can be 60, or I saw one with 80. Those bits of accommodation in those RV parks, those are competing with the local market, the local hotel market. They really aren't competing with somebody who's towing their own trailer. It's a completely different thing, and yet it's in the same space. So I always tell RV park owners, like, hey, look, when you're doing your pricing, this set over here, the part that's accommodation, you need to be benchmarking against what's happening in the local town nearby or wherever you are, and put those prices accordingly, because that's really who you're competing with. It's alternative accommodation. It's not RV park spaces. And so the same goes true that if you're in an urban setting and you've got an amazing Airstream, people will look for that experience and they'll pay for it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, like I said, without road noise, because sometimes you get that. So,
hi everyone, thanks for listening. This is just a quick note to say that this podcast is brought to you by Glamping North America. And what we do is we help you through the process of starting a glamping business, no matter what stage you're at. So if you need to find a property, we'll tell you where the most suitable area is to start your glamping business. If you have a property, we'll look at your local zoning code and tell you how likely you are to get your project off the ground according to the zoning rules and regulations in your local area. We'll also give you a really good roadmap of permits that you'll need and regulations that you'll need to be aware of to get your glamping business off the ground. If you need financing, we'll introduce you to our range of financing partners and do you a feasibility study that will give you some really solid financial projections and market analysis that will allow you to acquire the funding that you need. If you need glamping units, we'll talk you through your options and introduce you to one of our trusted manufacturing partners to ensure that you're looked after throughout the whole process. If you need a site design, or if you need permits to move forward with your project, we've got architects who will do all your drawings, make all your arguments, and essentially allow your dream to become a reality. The list goes on, and I don't want to bore you, so I'll let you get back to the episode in a second. All I'd say is that Glamping North America are the people to speak to about starting a glamping business in the US or Canada. So if you're even thinking of starting a glamping business, just get in touch with us at contact@glampitech.com or 646 586 2330. All the details are in the description, and no matter what stage of the process you're at, we will be able to help, whether it's doing something ourselves or pointing you in the right direction of our partners. Just let us know that you came from the podcast and we'll see about doing you a little discount along the way. So thanks for listening, and I'll let you get back to the episode. Yes, and obviously, you know, AutoCamp have been hugely successful, and when you answer this question, you can be as humble or take as much credit as you like for it. But you know, what if you could put your finger on one thing that a company like AutoCamp has done right and has resulted in its success? What would you put that down to?
Well, in terms of growth, and I'm going to get to that question. In terms of growth, I mean, AutoCamp has been kind of 1 or 2 a year, which is exactly what I would predict would be the case for a property that is that heavy of lift, meaning you've got to be in a great location and you've got to bring in all these Airstreams, you got to have a great clubhouse, and all this stuff is great, but it just doesn't lend itself to a really speedy growth. If you look at companies like InterContinental, I think they're at 18 or so properties right now. You know, they do leased land. Yes, they have great locations, but they go in and they're really light on the land, and they're just, you know, they're bringing that mobile unit in and they're setting it up, working it through the season, and then breaking it down and doing it again in the springtime. And they're much faster to market. Getaway is another brand that they're at probably 25 properties now. They'll be 40 in a year or two. You know, they don't have a clubhouse. They don't have central check-in. They just find the land, they buy it, they roll in a bunch of units, typically around 40 units, put it on the internet, and bam, they are going. I know it's a little bit longer than that in terms of setup, but it's pretty quick to get to market with those properties. So, but getting back to your question, what did AutoCamp do really right? Well, what they did super well is that they did stick to their knitting, and they did do great interior design, and they did, you know, really strong locations, and great marketing, and they really kind of set the tone for the brand to get that rate that they need. And so while they haven't grown as fast as some of the other companies, they really have been able to set the perception in the mind of the consumer that this is the top stuff, and this is really cool, and we want to be here. And a lot of that goes to you know, the steadfastness of saying this is elevated, so the pathways need to be nicely designed and lit, and the interior design needs to be this great, you know, mountain modern mid-century kind of thing, and people need to feel special when they're there because they're paying a good price for it. Mm-hmm. And then the market kind of sees that, and they see the aesthetics of it, and they're like, yeah, this is cool. So I think they've done a great job in kind of setting the tone for the brand, and that's exactly why they're able to come up with Field Station, because they can do kind of Field Station by AutoCamp. And you know, in branding, you can always move down. It's really hard to move up. You know, you can do Marriott, but doing JW Marriott or Marriott Marquis is harder. But if you do Courtyard by Marriott or Residence Inn by Marriott, you know, these things do really, really well because you've got the brand set here, and you're saying, and the consumer says, wow, I can have that brand caliber, consistency, quality for a lower price point. Yeah, sign me up. I'll do that. So AutoCamp are able to do that now because they've set that brand at such a strong standard.
Yeah, and companies like AutoCamp and UnderCanvas, they're well on their way to becoming household names. In fact, they probably already are household names in the industry. You know, hotel companies have obviously been around for a long time, and you know now what you're getting when you stay at a Marriott or a Hyatt or whatever. And those brands that have got in there early, like AutoCamp, like UnderCanvas, have done the hard yards and created that brand. They're set, that, you know, they're not set for life. They've obviously got to maintain those standards, but you know, they are becoming the go-to guys to stay at when you want a glamping escape, right? So I don't really know what I'm getting at here, but can you see what I mean in terms of that those companies are becoming household names, and the foundations they've laid with that branding in the early days and getting the pathways right and the units right are reaping the rewards now, and people know that what kind of experience they're getting when they book a stay at AutoCamp.
Yeah, and you know, as much as they're growing and evolving, the consumer is growing and evolving too, and they're learning about what you do and what you don't get at some of these places. You know, big issue is food and beverage. and whether you're going to provide the food and beverage or not. There's a group here, Collective Retreats, and Collective Retreats really lean right into the food and beverage. When you go there, you're going to get a great breakfast, and you're going to get a great dinner, and lunch may or may not be served depending on the location and what's going on, but you just know you're going to get like Michelin star caliber food and beverage, and that's kind of why you're paying the extra bucks to be there, is that you are going to get really good food and beverage, so it's a lot more glamorous than having to sort of fend for yourself and cook on your own barbecue or whatever. And that's been a big line of demarcation for a lot of these brands, is what are you doing about food and beverage? Are you depending on third parties to deliver it in? Are you selling barbecue kits in the merch store? What are you doing to get people fed and making that easy for them? But all the brands have the same sort of issue, which is the fact that when you're in these remote locations, you have a limited labor pool to grab from, and sometimes you have to provide workforce housing because that's not really in the area. In some of the more sensitive areas, you have traffic issues, and so getting your approvals for what you want to do is a constant challenge for everybody, and that's part of the thing. Putting the speed bumps on the supply growth is because people are just struggling with, like I said, traffic, employment, environment, getting the power, water, and sewage issues sorted. These are all things that really make it tough to get development done in the places you want to be, because they're so beautiful and people are protective of that, which is fine. Yeah,
of course. And switching lanes slightly now. Obviously, a lot of your day-to-day role now is kind of helping prospective operators design their sites and come up with the best guest experience possible, the one that's going to wow them and leave them wanting to come back more, leaving guests wanting to come and stay again in the future. Now, you don't have to give away your secret sauce, because I'm sure you do charge for that secret sauce, but if you could just give us a little bit of an idea of what you do when you work with a client, what's your process for designing a high-end guest experience, and what should prospective operators remember when they're doing this?
Sure. So a lot of my work is around the refinement of the dream, right? And every developer, owner, operator, they should have a dream or a vision of what they're planning to do, and my work tends to focus around refining that to make it something that's viable and workable and durable. And so I tend to look at yes, guest experience is one. What can you do from a guest experience perspective? And this goes from site planning to what are the facilities you're going to provide, all of that stuff. And then I'll also look at revenue generation. So, you should be somehow being able to generate more revenue than just the room rate, right? You should be, clipping the ticket on whatever adventures or concierge services or things that you're providing, or maybe renting mountain bikes or renting some sort of equipment or whatever. There needs to be other areas of revenue generation that you can do. And so I tend to look at that as well. And then the third part is service provision. How do you provide elegant and discreet service? And doing that, sort of thinking, kind of before the guest gets there, where is the garbage truck going to come in out of from? Where is the ugly stuff placed, and how are you screening that from the guest? And you have to kind of think like when you go to a Disneyland or some sort of theme park like that, and you never see anything bad, and yet that there's literally thousands of people running underneath you and behind walls and doing all this craziness to make this a great sort of fantastical product for you, but there's all this stuff going on in the background that you can't see. And so it's kind of the same way in glamping. You want to try and make it so people are only seeing trees and beautiful pathways and their accommodation, and you have to stand in the middle and look around and make sure that it's all a big Instagram moment, right? And so those are the three areas: guest experience, revenue generation, and then service provision. Those are kind of the ways I approach it. And that goes through from site planning and design, ingress and egress, and then also facilities, what facilities you're providing. And it is, the glamour part of glamping, I always say, is really the hospitality part. Providing accommodation That's easy. Throw up accommodation, leave it. But the part where you're regularly taking care of people, that to me is the hospitality part, and that's where the glamour comes in. And sometimes, you don't have the people to provide the service that gives you that hospitality, so you have to sort of step back and you have to go, well, how can I provide great hospitality and think what the guest needs without having an employee, to do that? And so it really comes into thinking about how people use the property and how they're using the area, and then providing for them the facilities and the ability to really, enjoy that area and that thing really well. And so I always say for these situations, you have to look at hospitality from a without labor and with labor, and see what you can provide. And the more you can do without labor, whether it's a bocce court or a pathway that brings you to a trailhead, or signage or lighting or whatever it might be, things that put you in the body and the mind and the eyes of that guest that's on your property. What are they thinking about? What's going to make it really easy for them to experience that? And if you're in the north, is there a mudroom as you walk into the cabin? Are the steps grated so the snow falls off? I mean, what are the things you're going to do to make it great for the guest? And it may always not be people providing that service.
Yeah, and you mentioned that there's opportunities for site owners to make money outside of just the accommodation. There's lots of potential for upsells in glamping. For people who maybe aren't aware of what kind of activities they can tie in or upsells they can add on to the experience, can you give some examples of typical ones that operators can make some extra money from?
Sure. So, I think when you have, when you're in an area that has at least a modicum of a small amount of service providers, whether it's a rafting company or a guided hiking company, or even like an artisan bakery or artisan coffee shop or whatever it might be that you have in your local community, really getting out there and saying, hey, look, I'm bringing in, X amount of people a week, a night, whatever, and I really want them to experience what you're doing. I want to help you to sell your product or your service or whatever. How can I do that? How can I be involved with that? And then, if they're charging, $50 for this experience, can you charge them, keep charging 50, but give me 10, that 50. And so clipping the ticket, because you're doing this, you're doing the marketing for them. You're doing the service. You're doing the thing that, that they themselves on their own probably can't do. Their marketing and an ad budget is probably minuscule, and yet you're going to be out there. You're going to be one of their 1,000 points of light, and so they should pay you a little bit for that effort. And that's just sort of a couple of examples. And then, again, getting back to the food and beverage thing, if it is, if that's an issue for you, you've got enough people that could have Friday or Saturday night have a food truck come along, and so you go to the whatever local restaurateur and say, hey, can you mobile your product over to me for a couple of hours and we'll run an event around it. And events are a big thing as well. I mean, of course there's the corporate events and social events and stuff like that. But, one of the things we did at AutoCamp, and I take no credit for this, it was nothing to do with me. We actually did our own events. And there's a lot of glamping places do that. This place called Mendocino Magic, they do a big event every year. Having your own event, and really, whatever it might be, there's the one in Mendocino Magic, they do an event around a meteor shower that happens in August every year. So they'll sell tickets to stay there, camp there, do everything, and then they set up a tea and hot soup thing on the top of this mountain, so people can watch this meteor shower for a couple of days in August. And so I think creating an event for yourself and inviting people to just come and enjoy your property. If they can stay there, great. But you can then bring in some local providers and create some sort of event around whatever it might be happening in that marketplace. And you got to get creative a little bit, but people love that, right? I mean, they love getting out and going to some odd thing that's never there any other time. And if they can stay overnight, not have to drive after having a couple of beers, that's good. That's a good thing. So,
yeah, and I've spoken to a lot of existing operators who, obviously partnering with local businesses can add revenue and improve your bottom line. But they've just said it's really rewarding to just add something to the local community, create business for the local community, meet new people, work with new people, and we're both in business, and it's enjoyable just meeting new people and new partners and creating new things with people. So as well as the financial benefit, there's a I don't quite know the word, a well-being benefit. It makes operators happier. It makes their life easier. It makes their job more fun.
Well, exactly, and you have to be a good steward of your land and all that stuff, and you need to be a good community partner as well, and you want everybody in the community on your side. So hopefully you're having some benefit. The other issue I think is involving the education and educational institutions where you can or how you can, depending on how amazing your property is. You never know, but I always think it's important to reach out to whether it's local schools or a university or whatever, and offer up your land for maybe the biology class wants to come out and do a field trip and identify some bits and pieces, or the wood shop class can create some great signage for you, or the local Boy Scout troop, the next scout what is it? The Eagle Scout project can be a bench on your property or something like that. So you really kind of get creative around that, but knowing that you have this great natural resource of some sort, and then offer that up to people. I mean, the bigger universities, I mean, they'll put together a good program that people will pay for to stay at your property and run a class for 3 or 4 days. There's a story I've told at AutoCamp when we opened up Yosemite. The first weekend there was a group that was came on board to stay with us for a couple of nights. It was called Messy Hair and Dirty Boots. I'm not sure if you've heard of this company, but Messy Hair and Dirty Boots is a German company that does training for photographers in the outdoors for weddings. So wedding photographers in the outdoors is really niche-y, right? Anyway, they had about 30 photographers that bought this program to be at AutoCamp in Yosemite for like 4 nights. It was like $5,000, and through the stay they would have training on how to take pictures of wedding couples in nature, right? And it was this whole training thing. It was great, and what they did was they hired three, I think it was three or maybe it was six brides and 6 grooms. These were models, so the most beautiful people, 6 of each. And the first morning, I mean, this thing was the Yosemite wasn't even open yet. The AutoCamp there, it was still, I mean, they were building things, saws were going off, and it was a construction site. We still weren't all the way done. And but the first morning, all the models decided they would go do a bit of a yoga session on the deck in the back of the thing. And so you had 12 of the most beautiful people in yoga gear, stretching and bending and doing all these things on this deck out in the middle of nature, and 30 photographers just going like that. And each of these photographers also had, their own Instagram following and social media following around the world. And so in the matter of just hours of not even being open up, everybody around the world had these amazing pictures of this beautiful place, the AutoCamp in Yosemite, with these beautiful people doing yoga on the deck. And you can just imagine, like, I want to go there. That's why I want to be there. Everybody was
I hope it wasn't a disappointment when they did turn up and they didn't see the beautiful models doing yoga.
Yeah, that might have been a bit of that, but at least the facility got highlighted. But this was my point was that this was very creative by the sales team and marketing team to get a group that literally deals with photography to stay there in the first instance. It was just super free advertising, and so that was good.
This is a great tactic. It's a great tactic. Just before we wrap things up, obviously, a lot of your experiences come from the traditional hotel industry, and that sort of merged into the newer outdoor hospitality industry. Is there anything that you think that I know we say mom and pop, and we sort of discuss the wordage of that term, but is there anything that you think mom and pop operators or prospective operators could take from the hotel industry that they may not be aware of, and maybe best practices or design practices that you think would be something for them to bear in mind, essentially, when they're getting into their first outdoor hospitality project?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost thing is, do you have the heart of an innkeeper or not? And if you don't, then I think you need to figure out how this can be passive, or can hire somebody that does have that heart of the innkeeper, meaning you really do care about hosting people and taking care of people. And I think that's kind of the first thing. And I'm not saying that the hotel industry does that really well, but if you're in the hotel industry, you want to have a little bit of passion about providing hospitality, you'd hope. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing is, as I mentioned before, is sort of really putting yourself in the mind of the consumer, of the guest. And it's amazing, I talk to a lot of people that want to get into this industry, and they're like, I've never been in the hospitality industry before, but boy, I've stayed at a lot of hotels and I really know what I like and I don't like. And then they get into the business, and then somehow they completely forget what it was like being a guest. And so, in hotel design and I think in good hotel design and hotel sort of operations, you really want to constantly put yourself, out in front of the hotel or out in front of your property. How are you approaching there? Like, did you just go through 5 hours of traffic? Did you just have a horrible run into the airport? How are you coming to that place? Or did you just come from your apartment in the city and you really just want to get outside and feel the, hug a tree and smell a campfire? Like, what are you sitting at? What's your guest typically sitting at when they walk in the door? And then what's going to make that really great for them? Walk in and someone hands you, a glass of champagne or a cold beer or something like that, and you're just like, oh, let me take a minute, because that road just killed me, or whatever it was, and all of a sudden you change the tone, you change the set, you change everything for that person. So I think that's a big issue for a lot of people getting into the industry, is really not putting themselves in the mind and eyes of that guest and understanding how they feel when they're approaching your property. And then what do they see? What do they see? Are they seeing a welcoming face? Are they, and this isn't like what you have to do. Like, if you look at the Getaway product says you're going to go into nature and you're going to have a little tiny house, and you're going to commune with your friend, your lover, or whoever you're going to be with there. But that's it. You're going to be an acre and a half from anybody else. You're not going to check in with anybody. You're going to have it all on your phone, and you're going to do your security code, and you're going to get in, and there really isn't a lot of human interaction, whatever. And that's what they're selling. And if that's what you're selling, then that's fine too. On the other hand, if you are definitely going to be hosting and making sure, like, when people arrive, I got to have somebody talk to them, because I need to explain that, don't go over there because there's a really nasty dog over there, or don't, make sure you walk around the corner over here. And when you get to your room, please make sure you turn on this light and don't turn on that light, or whatever it might be. It all depends on your particular property, but again, getting in the mind of the guest and literally going out in front of your place and walking in or driving in and seeing what they see, not what you see, because you've seen it all the time. Try and get your mind in what they see, and then make adjustments to hopefully get it better. Because what do you want? You want the guests to be happy. You want to write really great reviews, and you want to get your room rate up. And you can't do that if you got bad reviews and you haven't thought about these things.
Amazing. Well, Todd, we're probably going to have to start charging for this podcast if it keeps having as much value as this episode. So that was absolutely amazing. Thank you. If people want to get in touch with you, speak to you about their project, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah. So horwathhtl.com is probably the easiest way. And you go to outdoor hospitality, and under the services, you'll see my ugly mug there. But Horwath, HORWATHHTL.com. And then under services, look for outdoor hospitality.
Okay, we'll put the link to that in the description as well, so
that's great.
You can go straight there.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you, Todd. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we'll be having you back on again, and hopefully people found it valuable. And yeah, thank you very much.
Good stuff. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.